Welcome, viewers. My name is Andrea Daley, and I'm going to be the host of a series of DCAT programs that will be focusing on people who made the town of Danvers the envy of the North Shore. Today's guest is Christ Bouras, former police chief, and his career has spanned 44 years. He's the longest-serving policeman in the town of Danvers, and he entered as a patrolman and eventually became the chief. And we're going to be focusing on his rise to a position of authority and respect. And he's a respected and dedicated person, and he's the type of person that has made Danvers the envy of the North Shore. Welcome, Chief. Welcome to this program.
Thank you very much, Andrea.
And we have a series of pictures that we're going to be looking at that span your career and how you came to Danvers. You're a Peabody resident, and there are a set of circumstances, sad circumstances, that brought you to this town. And he has been our police chief for a considerable amount of time. How many years altogether?
20 years.
20 years.
I was on the job for 44 years, and I was the chief of police for 20.
Tremendously long term. Most people don't even last that amount of time, even in one position, but you took on this responsibility. How did you come to Danvers? I have a picture here of your parents.
Well, actually, I was born and raised in Peabody at 15 Tracy Street, and that's a picture of my mother and father. And I was one of 9 children, and certainly back then in the 30s and the 40s, we were very poor. 9 of us. My father used to work in restaurants. He worked, and my mother used to work in leather factories.
Really?
When I was a young kid. And I can remember when I was 10 years old, my oldest brother took me up, and I saw my father, and he was working for the WPA.
The
you know
works
that,
yes,
that work
yes,
product was?
Works Progress
And what he did, because the government was giving us food and clothing at the time, but what my father did was I went and saw him and hundreds of other people digging water and sewer pipes
by hand.
By hand.
By hand,
They
right.
were digging trenches to put the water and sewer pipes by hand. And then later in life, my father became the cook at the poorhouse in Peabody. You remember that at all?
No, I often had heard about it, and it was someplace in Peabody, but I wasn't quite sure where.
Well, right now, it was in the area where the new Peabody YMCA is on Linfield Street.
Really? Okay.
There was a huge farm there, and he was the chef. And he worked there, and while he was working there as a chef, I used to work on the farm. As a young man, I remember I used to work in the fields. I used to go every summer since I was about 10 until I graduated from high school. I worked on farms all summer long. I used to deliver newspapers. My father had us selling blueberries. And at that time, the closest thing to Danvers that I got to without realizing it was Gardner Park, because I used to go there selling blueberries.
That's right.
What I thought were the rich people in town.
But most of us, even in Danvers, even my generation, used to be picked up by farm trucks to weed out the carrot fields and the different.
And that's what I did. I delivered newspapers. I did just about everything to survive, and that's what it was all about. But unfortunately, when I was a senior in high school, my father was diagnosed with, apparently at that time it wasn't. They weren't quite sure, but it was a form of Lou Gehrig's disease.
I see.
And the result of that, he became ill. He wasn't able to work, and they took the house away from us. We had a home on Liberty Street, and he lost the house. And my brother Charlie was in the Marines at the time, and when he came out, that's how we bought a house on Liberty Street in Danvers. And I was a senior in high school, and I wanted to complete my schooling in Peabody. And every day I would...
I'll bring this other picture up. This shows you a picture of yourself.
Yep, and every day
high school graduation, good-looking guy.
I would walk down to the Danvers Port Crease and Cook, take the train to Peabody Square, and then walk up to Peabody High and go to school, and then I'd walk down to Walnut Street because I had a job there in a little cozy corner cafe where they served sandwiches and was almost across from the Lotus hardware store. Do you remember the
Yes,
Lotus
yes, I
hardware
do.
store? And then I'd walk home, and I did that until I graduated high school. And then when I graduated high school, I was not a very good student. I needed help at the time, but there was no help to be given. My folks didn't speak the language, and so I had a hard time. And then I joined the Navy, and I was in the Navy for a couple of years, and I was that seasick sailor with a bucket around his neck.
You got
And
seasick on that ship?
I was seasick. We went to the North Atlantic, I remember, for about 3 months, and I probably never left my bunk. And then when we finally got back to Virginia, they discharged me. And then I went to work for Pioneer Plastics in Salem on Goodhue Street. And that was a sweaty, terrible job, but that's what I had until there was a friend of mine. He was a police officer in Peabody. His name was George Benegopoulos. May he rest in peace. He's the one that said to me one day, he said, "Chris, take the exam." And
which exam was that?
The police exam.
Was it a civil service exam?
It was a civil service exam, and I had no idea that I was not the police type person. I like to think I was just a good kid. That's all I was. And I did. I took the exam, and apparently at that time, people weren't interested in being a police officer for some reason or other, but I was the only one in Danvers that took it. And one day I received a call to report to the Danvers police station, and now you have to believe me when I say I've never been to Danvers Square. I didn't know where Danvers Square was. I didn't know where the police station was. And
well, Danvers was a very small town
very,
at that time.
very,
we had probably more cows than we had people
but
at that
the
time.
only road I knew was the road from Liberty Street to Peabody.
Okay.
And that's what happened. And then when I went there, and you know, I was the type of kid that always was at the beach, and always dark. And I went to the front door, and there was a gentleman there, and he says, "Yes, sir." And I says, "My name's Chris Bouras." And he says, "You're Chris Bouras?" And he looked at me, and I guess I looked different than most people. And he says, "I'll have to get back to you." And then I didn't get a call, and I went to my friend George Benegopoulos, and I said, "George, no one's calling me back. I don't know what's going on." And he said, "Let's go together." And we went together, and he introduced me to some of the police officers there in Danvers that he knew.
Who was the chief there at the time?
Chief Kerwin, and he was
What a
he was
nice
a
guy.
wonderful.
He was a
He
nice
was a
guy.
wonderful, wonderful person. And I was appointed a police officer. And you know, I was a total stranger. I was different than most. I was 23 years old.
You mean you had dark skin? You had dark
yeah,
skin.
I had dark hair. And I had no training. At that time, the only thing you had to do was study a little blue book and take an exam. There was no training. I never went to a training camp. I had no idea what it was to be a police officer.
Were you issued a service
They
revolver
gave me
too?
a gun and a badge, and I remember the very first night they said that Danvers Square is your beat. You got to walk and check all the doors in Danvers Square.
Was Danvers Square a forthcoming type of community, or
Not,
just a little
not
type?
at that time.
Not at that time.
There was nothing there, and I can remember walking down the first night on the job, and I walked down to Danvers Square. I didn't know any of the streets. I had no idea, and I looked up and I said, "God, what do I do?" I had no idea what to do, and if I saw a car coming, I'd hide because I wouldn't know how to give them directions. This is true. It's absolutely true. But then,
Did they give you any parameters of this is your beat, or
well,
did
the
you
beat
just
was
check the
Danvers
door,
Square.
the doorknobs and make
I had
sure?
to find out where Danvers Square
where
was.
was it?
But what happened to me was that I was different for some reason or other. There was a few that never really accepted me. I guess I wasn't born in Danvers.
Well-
I didn't grow up in Danvers. I was different, and for some reason or other, they just didn't.
You were also from Danvers Port, which was, of course, the melting pot of the
Well,
entire
I
community.
found out that later that it wasn't a good thing to be from Danvers
It
Port.
wasn't. I grew up there too. They had all kinds
I
of
thought it
nationalities.
was because I was from Peabody and I was a little bit different, and my ethnicity was Greek. You know, I was a Greek kid. And,
well,
but
Danvers
anyway,
Port had everything: Greeks, Italians, name it, and it was a melting pot.
But there were some that really never accepted me, and I was just a kid. And I was on the job for a couple of years, Andrea, and this is true. I was getting a little upset, and there was a day that I said, I can beat these guys. And I put the law on these index cards, question, answer.
So you made your own
I made
study
my own, that's right.
Right.
And my pockets, when I was out in Danvers Square, were full of these cards. Always had cards in my hand. Question,
regarding the law.
Regarding the law. I studied those cards, you won't believe it, for 6 years.
I do believe it, because you're a dedicated person.
I studied those cards for 6 years, and then, as you know, there was a lieutenant's exam. Now, there's a picture here somewhere.
I'm going to bring that in there. But before that, because this is where I met you for the first time.
Well.
Because I taught at the Tapley School, Maple Street School. Maple Street School. I taught at so many schools, sometimes I get mixed up. But this was the Maple Street School, and that was the first time I met your future wife, Jeannie Moran.
Well, Jeannie Moran. I was on the job a couple of years, and Jeannie was a teacher at the Maple Street School, and I was the officer crossing the kids.
Well, we needed you because they had the B&M train, the Boston Main train came right by the Maple Street School, right Maple Street Church.
I remember I asked my wife to go to the policeman's ball with me, and she went home, and you're not going to like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it because it was true. And she went home, and her family said, well, why are you going with a black person?
Is that right?
And she says, he's not black, he's Greek. But anyway, we dated. We dated for quite a while, and there was an issue there between our relations, but it took us 7 years, and we finally got married in 1963.
This is a lovely photo. So that you got married in the Greek church.
We got married in the Greek church, and then we got married in the Catholic church. And my wife is more religious than I. I was just a proud Greek at the time.
This shows another picture of you in the force at that particular time.
Well, this was in 1963.
This was
that was after I became a lieutenant, but there's quite a story as to how I became a lieutenant.
I think that comes a little bit later on.
Oh, does it?
But this here is the police station that is behind where?
Well, where the Lions ambulance is now.
Yes.
That was a fire
Central
station
fire
there,
station, right.
And there was a little building, and there was a police station.
That's right.
And this is where
And that police station now is in Middleton.
That old building
That
is in
old
Middleton.
building is in
You're
Middleton.
absolutely right.
And then there's an awful lot of things that when we went over your pictures, I was really amazed because you did make lieutenant. That comes a little bit later on. But this here, it shows the formation of a riot squad. At that time, that was during the 60s, during the
60s.
Vietnam.
See, when I became a lieutenant, I was probably the youngest lieutenant in the county, it seems. And because at the time students were rioting all over the place, and it was time for Essex County to have a riot squad. And maybe because I was young and in pretty good shape,
you're still in pretty good shape.
They put me in charge of the Danvers riot squad. And we had about 100 officers from all over Essex County. And we responded a couple of times in Beverly, at the beaches in Beverly. And kids were throwing bottles at us. And
there was
glass.
An awful lot of that. It was
big
Vietnam and Kent State, and they had so many problems
suddenly
about
I became an expert in riot control.
This here, I think, is what you were alluding to.
Well,
That was,
that,
you know, people think that a person in power just gets there
No,
pretty
no.
easy. Doesn't happen. This
now
one here.
that it was a tough time. Now I indicated that I studied. I studied for 6 years, and then there was finally a lieutenant's exam in 1963, and I took that exam, and I topped it. I topped the examination. I got about a 97
That's
in it,
excellent.
I guess, at the time. And there were 2 positions, and Dan McFadden was the town manager at the time. And now during those 6 years, I became very friendly with the citizens of Danvers. People like Baron Mayer,
Yes,
Don
yes,
Ingraham,
yes.
Arthur Whalen, they
Arthur
were all
Whalen,
selectmen
yes.
at the time. And they knew me, they liked me. And now it was time for them to make a decision as who's going to be a lieutenant. And McFadden appointed Sergeant McDonald. He was on the job many years before I even got there. So, and then the second position was that the chief at the time, he wanted Officer Noonan to be a lieutenant. But the selectmen, they wanted me.
And that would have been, I think you mentioned who it was. I think it was Baron Mayer.
Baron
I
Mayer.
Noted some of them. Baron Mayer, Don Ingraham, Earl Robbins, Arthur Whalen,
Yeah.
and Ellison Morse.
Yeah. And Dan McFadden he was going into private business.
Yes, he was.
And Baron Mayer at the time approached him and asked him that if he would leave that second position to the next town manager to make that decision. And he did. He left the position, and then Bob Curtis was just a couple of years older than I, and a very smart guy, nice guy, and
I had several of his children as
he
students.
became the town manager, and certainly he had the ears of the chief and the deputy chief, and they wanted Noonan to be the next lieutenant. And the selectmen, they liked me. Yeah, people got to know me over these 6 years, and they liked me, I guess. And that was quite a battle, and it ended up that I was finally appointed the police chief.
And it shows this here that it was a
I'm
yielded
sorry, I
to
said police chief, but I was appointed a lieutenant.
a lieutenant.
At the time.
And
That's right.
you know, so. And here is a picture of
This
you
is
as
probably the first day
as
that
a
I
lieutenant.
served as a lieutenant on the 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. shift in Danvers.
5 to 1.
5 to 1.
It's a beautiful picture of a up and coming.
And I
man.
have to say that the people that I was in charge with were a certain group that just didn't particularly care for me for any number of reasons. They didn't care for me, and it was not an easy situation at the
I'm sure
time.
it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then we have here this. We had a controversy, and a new police station was put on land that was donated by the Liberty Tree Mall organization. Actually,
That's right.
the police station, they had a controversy whether it was going to go where the old First National was, which is where the Walgreens
On High
pharmacy
Street,
on High
that's right.
Street.
Yep.
That probably would have been the better, but they tucked it away in the back.
Yeah.
And there was a big controversy on this, too, for town meeting to even allow that station to be built there.
Yeah.
And it was a dedication of
Now,
the
at that
station.
time, Ed Farley was the chief of police at that time when they built that new station.
And it shows you here. This is when you got your lieutenancy.
No, this is the picture when I became a captain.
A captain, sorry,
Now,
captain.
when I got married in 1963, and as we indicated earlier, there was quite a controversy.
Yes.
And in 1968, I went to Salem State, full-time student, and I graduated in 1972.
How did you work that in?
It wasn't
You know,
difficult.
because really,
I was working nights, and I was going to school days, and I graduated in 1972, and then then I graduated Salem State, and then I went to Northeastern, and I received my master's degree in the
wow.
Administration of Criminal Justice, And then there was a captain's exam in 1974, and I took the captain's exam, and I topped it, and Bob Curtis appointed me to captain. So this is when I became a captain in 1975. And that's my daughter, Christina, and my son, Matt, and my wife, Jean, and I.
This one here shows the day that the new station was built, and I think it's Foley, isn't it, Chief Foley?
Ed Foley and Alan Weeks was the deputy chief. In 1979, I took the chief's exam, and once again, I was a high mark, and I was appointed. Wayne Marquis at the time was the acting town manager. Bob Curtis went on to another job, and Wayne was the acting town manager, and he appointed me the chief of police. And this shows where Ed Foley is giving me the key to the office, and Arnold Weeks was right there. It was quite a day.
It was, and
it was quite a day.
I wanted to tell my story of when I met you on a formal basis. I met you on informal basis because on Liberty Street, where you lived, halfway down, your family made bleach. And my father used to bring me down in a baby carriage, and plastic hadn't been invented, so you brought your own bottle, and they would give you bleach.
My brother George called me up the other day. He says, "Tell him about the bleach." And that's right. My brother George and my brother Charlie, they used to make bleach on Liberty Street.
Correct.
And they would sell it. And you bought some of that bleach?
I did. My father, he was pushing me in the baby carriage because at that time you walked or took the bus. We didn't have cars the way we do now. But the second time that I met you on a formal basis, you're being given the keys to the police station here, is when you gave me a call. I was chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and there was a controversy about arcades. Arcades coming, Aladdin's Palace coming to the Liberty Tree Mall, and I got a call from you, and I was frightened to death because you said, "Hello, Andrea Daley," and I said, "Yes," and then you said to me, "This is Chris Bouras, the Chief of Police," and I was thinking to myself, why is he calling me? What did I do wrong? But I came to your office at the new police station, and you had changed your office to another one from Foley at that particular time, and I came in and you welcomed me, and you said to me, the reason why I called you here was because of Aladdin's Palace and the arcade. And I had mentioned to you, I said, "This is a beautiful office," and you said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And we went over to the window, and out the window you said, "Do you see that steeple? That's the steeple to the Baptist church."
That's right.
And I said, and he said, "And the reason why I picked this office was because each day I look out and I see the Baptist church, and I know that that was where I came from, Danversport."
Danversport.
And that always stuck with me.
That's right.
It always stuck with me because I'm a Danversporter, and I'm proud of it. And here's a picture here. There's a lot of controversies, and at this particular time, this is the police force all in uniform, and you were part of this. But I remember a time that I was watching the parade, and you can elaborate on it, in front of Danvers Town Hall, and you were the only person walking. Your fellow officers were not in union with you, and you stood alone. And there was a controversy, union contracts and unions.
Well, this was not. This was
before that.
I walked alone after that, but this was my first. In 1979, when I was the chief, this was my first Memorial Day parade.
Yes.
But see, when I became the chief, I still had to deal with that certain element that didn't quite care for me.
Well, they didn't like the change.
And one of them said, and I hope people appreciate that when that Greek becomes the chief, that he was going to be the union president. And for the next 2 years, there was all sorts of controversies. In fact, I think you have pictures of it here. And that gentleman, I fired him within 2 years. because of what he did, not because of what I did. And there was a time when the union refused to march with me. And I remember that day, I was marching all alone. And the greeting that I received from the citizen of Danvers was just
Tremendous.
Just tremendous. I almost cried because it was just such a tremendous feeling. I was out there alone, and the people of Danvers were supporting me.
I remember being in this spot, looking at the town hall,
Yeah.
and when you came through, there was an element, because somebody has to be the boss, somebody
That's right.
has to be the
That's
one
right.
in authority in order to make things work. And as you passed along this route, you could hear people clapping for you in support of you.
It was awesome.
It was a very emotional parade.
It was awesome.
I can still remember it.
You know, Andrea, Danvers to me was a gate to heaven, as far as I was concerned.
I know.
It made my life.
And
It really did.
the people appreciated it enormously. And here is another one. I got these from the archives that DCAT had. And you didn't even know about that. There's you right here in the center.
Yeah.
And this was, you can tell the story about the police and the fire
Well,
department.
see, what happened was we were next door to each other at that
Right,
time.
right.
So there was always, we were constantly at each other.
Right.
Well, you know, fire versus police.
Right,
You know,
right.
who did a better job,
Right.
or who was necessary, who was
Right.
not. And then we came up with the idea of competing against each other. And I was no more a basketball player. I was a little short guy. I'm about 5'8". and that's Leo Simon. He was a great,
nice guy.
He was a great guy. He died awfully young.
Yes, he did.
And this is a picture of us playing basketball. And we had a great relationship.
And this was
really
at
did.
the old Holton Richmond
At the
gym.
old Holton Richmond,
Richmond
gym.
gym.
That's right, too.
And it was a fundraiser too. I got this particular picture from the archives of DCAT, and I was really surprised to see that. It's a wonderful picture of cooperation.
Yeah,
Do they
and
do
that's what
any
it
of
was.
these things? No.
No, I'm not aware of it.
I'm
but
not
I
either.
don't think. I'm not sure.
I'm
So
not sure.
I don't want to say because I'm not sure.
And this
Well,
here
this-
was a story in itself.
Well, this was when I was a captain at the time, and that was back in 1977.
This was on Page Street, wasn't
That
it?
was on Page Street. That was an incident where there was he lived almost across the street from where Murphy's Fruit Market
Yes,
used
yes,
to be
yes.
there.
It was the municipal
on
parking
Essex Street,
lot.
That's right. And there was a gentleman there. He had a wife and 2 kids, and apparently he had a mental breakdown. And what he was doing was he had his wife and his kids upstairs in the second door window, and he had a gun, and he was shooting the gun. And so certainly I was the captain, and they called me to the scene. And once again, I never had any experience in dealing with that type of a situation. But he was up there shooting, and I had a bullhorn, and I began to plead with him to let his family go,
Leave.
you know. And I convinced him to let his family leave. They came out through the front door of the house. But he kept shooting. He wasn't shooting. We cleared the entire area. And he wasn't shooting at anybody. He was just shooting in the air. And there were a couple of the officers there wanted to take him out. And I says, no, you know, don't do that. And so the next thing I did was we had a gun that blew the gas into the house. I broke just about every window with that the bombs that I put in there. And then suddenly it became quiet. And Fred Dragon and I said to Fred, he's passed on. He was a great cop.
He was
Freddie
a great
Dragon was. And I said, Fred, you were going to go in, put your gas mask on. We put our gas masks, and on the way up, Freddie Dragon was overcome by gas. And I took him out, and Officer Noonan was standing behind. I said, put on the mask. And so then we went up together, and there was a door on the right-hand side. And as I remember it, I don't remember whether I opened the door or Noonan opened the door, but that we finally opened the door, And this gentleman was standing there, and he had a pistol in his hand, and he was no more than 3 feet away from me, and he aimed at my head, and he fired, and he missed. I think he missed me by about an inch. And then I grabbed him, and we wrestled him down, and we went all the way out into the street. Now, that was the very serious part, but the funny part of it was that the news reporter for the Danvers Herald,
what was the Howard Iverson?
Howard Iverson, was standing there with taking pictures of everything that was going on, and come to find out when he went to develop, he didn't have any film in the camera. But you know,
that's a silly story for a very serious situation.
Very briefly, we didn't talk about this, but there was a hardware store in Danvers Square. Clarizio.
Yes.
And he's a police officer today.
Clarizio, he was a police officer today in Danvers.
Yeah. And I'm still having trouble with some of the people that I was involved with. I had to go to court about 2 months or so ago, and he took me to court, and he told me, "I've known you since I was 10 years old." And I says, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I was 10 years old when I saw you in that situation on Essex Street."
That was scary.
And he remembered it. That was quite a situation. I was very lucky, and my wife at the time gave me hell. She says, "You're the captain. You weren't supposed to go in." But that was a tough
I'm going to
situation.
ask you a question on
Yes.
that. Have you ever fired a service revolver, your service revolver? You did in this here, didn't you? Or
No, I didn't fire at that. I fired. There was another incident that I fired. There was a break-in up at the trading post.
Oh,
and
yeah,
there was someone there, and they were firing back at me, and I fired back. But no one was hurt. No one got shot.
Because this is
Yeah,
the shield and the gun is a tremendous amount of responsibility.
It is. That was
So
quite-
you've only fired your service revolver one time in your career?
One time, yeah, to
In your whole
defend
career?
myself. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Here is another controversy here.
Well,
it shows a picture of Wayne Marquis. He looks like Ulysses S. Grant with a beard, doesn't he?
He's just a kid. Yeah.
He's just a kid.
He's
He's just a kid. And this one here was the appointment of when you were going to become
The chief, yeah. I guess the argument was that Wayne was the acting town manager.
Yes.
And he appointed me as the chief. And I guess the question was that did he have the authority to do that? It was not that big a deal because then eventually he did appoint me to be the chief of police in 1979. Yeah.
But this was, of the two appointments, both of them were a controversial issue.
My life as a police officer was not an easy one.
No, well,
it was different.
I
Yeah.
wanted to point that out. You know, somebody thinks that somebody gets into power, and it's not without some controversy, and it is. And it mentions in this one here that Borves was appointed the acting chief by Wayne Marquis, and this next picture shows the vehicle that you get with the job.
With the job, the highway safety job, and you notice I still have my hair, but I had a lot more of it than back then.
We all did.
Yeah.
And of course, Wayne had
And
hair
Wayne,
all
he
over
had
his
his
chin
hair,
at
that's
that
right,
particular
yeah.
time. I think it was because he was so young
He was
that
a
he
young
wanted.
guy.
He was a very young person. He was under 25 years old.
I
at
think he
this
was
time.
24.
24.
I think he was 24 years old when he appointed me the chief. Yeah.
And he had to look older, so he grew the beard.
He was a smart kid.
He is a smart kid.
Yeah, he was,
He is a
yeah.
smart kid, and of course he grew up on Lawrence Street, so we call that Halfport. He did go to the Danversport School, so he has some connection with us. He himself is a fabulous man. I hope to get him on one of these shows to show his rise to a position of
That
envy.
would be very interesting. He's
I
had
think
quite
so,
a career.
too.
Yeah.
Yes, and Danvers is the community that other people in other towns point to with envy. We're so well run,
they do.
so well run. And it's mainly because of the people who made it. And then we have a friend of my husband's and myself being appointed as the second police post from you, and this is Sergeant Billy Webb, who grew up on Lawrence Street in that area.
Yeah, my first job as a police chief was that because I was a captain and I made chief. There was a captain's position that was available at the time, and it was not easy for me. I only recommended. I didn't make the appointments,
I see.
but the town manager and I always agreed on who I recommended. And that was not an easy decision at the time, but I decided on Billy Webb to be my captain, and now when I think back, it was the right decision.
It was the right decision.
He was a good man.
He really was,
Yeah.
and he died quite
He died.
young.
He died quite young.
Just a
that's
few
right.
years ago, and just a wonderful person. And it's interesting because it was his father-in-law,
Joe Nangle.
Joe
Yeah,
Nangle,
Joe
that was
Nangle.
opposed to
Joe-
your
oh,
appointment,
Joe Nangle.
and it was
he
really
was a tough.
yes, he
He
was.
was a tough Irishman. That's
Yeah.
what he was. And
Yes, he was.
but
He-
you know what? He did a great job too.
did.
For the town of Danvers.
He did, and then
But-
it was just like full circle that you appointed
His-
Bill Webb,
his
his son,
daughter's husband.
his
yeah.
daughter's
His
husband,
daughter's
to the
husband
job,
to being the captain.
which shows that you weren't biased.
Well, I have
You
a
were-
short memory.
It's good to have a short memory on certain positions. And this is I thought this was an interesting photo. There was a thievery of children's clothing,
Yep.
and you were able to find out who did it.
I pursued it. I was involved with the Peabody Police Department.
Yes.
Together, we finally found out who it was. He was arrested, and there's quite a picture there of all the clothing. I couldn't understand it. It was more of a prank than anything else, I think.
I think so
Yeah,
too.
I had no idea that they had any value on the street.
But they did, and it was for homeless children, and it was a good thing that it was found. And this article here,
Well, this article and then
this here is what is being pursued now. We still get telephone calls and whatever about supporting police funds, and when a person gets a telephone call or something in the mail, they feel that in some ways that they should be doing this to support the police, but then you backed off and you wanted to explain the reason why you didn't feel that this was something that was good for the police department.
I at the time, the police union, in order for them to raise funds, they had to hire these people who had no idea what Danvers was all about. The only interest that they had was to get money. And they would make phone calls to the local
Yes,
business
yes.
people, to citizens, and give them a million reasons why they should donate to the Danvers Police Department. And that was totally unprofessional. Well, I felt that very strongly, and I was upset, and I wouldn't allow it. I couldn't stop it, but I spoke against it, and I asked people not to donate. And that didn't make very many friends with the union members, but my job as chief was to protect the people of Danvers, and not to rob them.
Right.
And so I spoke out against it, and I think, unfortunately, they're still doing it. I'm not sure.
But the split
But
is 80-20.
the split was absolutely ludicrous.
Right, that
It
they
was
kept
ridiculous.
80% of it and 20% came to the force.
That's right. Yep.
And this one here, this here is even resurrecting itself now, the arcade.
The arcade.
The arcades.
Danvers, back then, was no place to have an arcade. We didn't want to be the focal point of all these people coming in to Danvers.
Well, we had the Liberty Tree Mall, and
Well,
it was
the
just
Liberty Tree Mall was, that's right. That changed the town of Danvers.
two things
a lot.
changed the town of Danvers: Woodvale
and
the Liberty Tree
Mall. That's right. And we didn't have the manpower to support the Liberty Tree Mall, in a sense, to support these arcades that they wanted to put in there. I was totally against it, and I voiced my thoughts. And I think, I don't quite remember if I was successful or not.
You were not.
I was not.
You were
That's
not,
right.
because the Board of Selectmen at that time, it was a 3-2
3-2
vote.
vote,
And the
that's
two
right.
people that did not want this arcade there was John George and John Webb.
You're right.
They were opposed
That's
to
right.
this.
That's right.
And at that particular time, there were 65. They wanted to have 65 machines in Aladdin's Palace, and in the entire town before that, everywhere in the town, there were only 45
That's right.
machines.
That's right.
And this is where I came in on that day that I came to the station, and I didn't know what I had done right or wrong. And it was the pinball arcade, and it's still servicing now. If you remember, the Board of Selectmen were being enticed into permitting a slot machine.
A slot machine. That's
and
right.
it went to another town.
I don't think it happened, though. Right?
No, it did not
it
happen.
didn't happen.
It did not happen. It's not enhancing anything. This here was the trouble at the station. This was a trouble time.
I had to do. See, when I became the chief, I was a young man and I had no ideas. And what I wanted to do was to change. I wanted to professionalize being a police officer. And everything I did was against the union, I guess. And like I indicated before, there was a gentleman that when I became the chief, he said he wanted to be the union president. And he didn't quite make it.
No, he didn't. And this shows the support of the reserve. They wanted, at this particular time, they didn't want to have a reserve force coming in and filling in the extra spots.
Well, you know, when I became a police officer back in 1955, reserve police officers were on the job at that time, and it was about the best training program you could give for future police officers because they were doing it on a part-time basis. And what the union wanted was that when they wanted to go on vacation, and they wanted to be filled by full-time people so they can receive overtime. And I just didn't agree to it, and as a result, we had an ongoing problem with the union.
Well, and this again this was a funny article that I had seen, and we had saved, and it was about the problem at the mall because it said that it was a hot spot for cars being stolen.
Well, see what happened. Danvers wasn't, built for the mall. Too many people, too many cars, and we didn't have the officers to patrol the area. And they were stealing all kinds of cars. They were doing all kinds of different violations. And in fact, my wife was they stole her car, and it was recovered in Chelsea, I think, at the time. And what I did was I had a big argument with those that were in charge of the mall because they wanted us to do more, and I wanted them to hire people to patrol the area. I couldn't. We didn't have that many police officers to do that, and I fought like hell for them to put on more people to control their own problems down there. And I think they did eventually.
Yes, they did.
Yeah,
they have their own force over there. And, but that was interesting that this was a personal experience for you.
Oh, it was.
So
my wife had a beautiful Cadillac, and it was demolished in Chelsea.
And this one here, I thought, there are a lot of things that you instituted that no other police force ever instituted, and this is the survey.
That was one of the better things I did, because I wanted to, it was a survey, and there's all sorts of questions there, and I wanted the citizens, without signing it, to give us an opinion of what we're doing. There were several questions that I asked them, what do you think? Are we doing it right? What should we be doing? When a police officer responds, is he courteous? Is he good to you? And once again, the union didn't like that because I was opening up criticism in a sense for them. But a lot of people responded, and that was one of the best things I did because it gave me a pulse as to what the citizens of the town of Danvers wanted, what they thought of us.
And one of them was it was just a 10-question survey, and out of that survey became 2 other programs that was instituted by this survey, which you initially formulated. And one was a vandalism task force and a crime watch program where it would increase citizens' participation. And I remember that you'd put in a decal in the window for a citizen's watch if you were a citizen. And
And there was another one. I had an academy for the young people.
Yes, you
A
did.
police academy for
Yes,
young
you
people.
did.
I don't know whether you have that here or not.
I don't know.
But you know what it was? I had an academy for those that had an interest to find out what police work is all about. And there was a lot of young people involved at any age, whatever age. If they were interested in see what police officers are all about, they would come, and I would put on a program for them.
And from that program, which you instituted, there are 7 police officers on the force that were my students.
That's right.
That's right. And so that was something that the school supported. And then at that particular time, you instituted the DARE project with
DARE.
Officer Conley.
Officer Gardner
And he
Conley.
came, Gardner
He was
Conley.
a safety officer.
Yes.
He was
Yes.
in the schools
Yes.
conducting the DARE programs.
Yep. And this here, this really impressed me.
Well,
And I tell, well, let me tell you this first before you do. You were the first chief to have a policy where this was this is the standard that all police departments should have. And Danvers became the first municipality in the nation to become accredited.
No, not
Not in the nation.
No, not the nation. We were the first in the state.
In the state.
We were the 30th in the nation
Nation.
to become nationally accredited. And what does that mean? It means that you conform to standards that are professional, that are updated, and it was quite an experience. But once again, I had all kinds of problems instituting that. In fact, one of the officers, he was a president at the time of the union, and he said I was greedy. And the only reason I was doing that was because I was greedy, meaning that next time the town manager evaluated me, he would give me more money because I instituted this type of a program.
And they also have, I'm going to move along.
Okay.
This shows you as being you are the president-elect of the Massachusetts Police Chiefs Union.
Association. No,
And
that
you-
was yeah, there was about 300 chiefs in the state.
There we go.
And
1980.
I became the president at that time in 1980, 86, I think it was. And that was quite an honor.
It is quite
That
an
was
honor.
quite an
An honor for you and an
Yeah.
honor for the town that you represent. And here is it has another article about you leading the Bay State Police Chiefs.
That's right. Yep, that
That
has
and
to do with becoming the president of the Mass Chiefs Police Association.
It's all unbelievable. Unbelievable to rise to that position.
Oh, it was no big deal.
And then, yes, it is a big deal because you wanted it and you studied for it. And this here is the
This-
Jimmy Fund.
The Jimmy Fun Run, that was just a wonderful idea. There was a group of chiefs back then in the late 80s, and what we decided was to try to raise money for the Jimmy Fund. And what we decided to do was to rent a bus and put on as many chiefs
it
as
shows
they
this on the
volunteered
next one.
to go to the western part of the state. And we would drive out west on Friday night, and then early Saturday morning, those chiefs that were eligible to, were strong enough to run, they would run following the bus. And when they got tired, another chief would go out and do that. We did that from the western part of the state, the New York border, all the way into Boston.
You're kidding.
Yep.
How many
And
miles?
thousands of and the chiefs along the route would encourage their citizens to donate money, and they still do it today.
Yes.
In fact, the last couple of years, there's only a few of us that are living, and they invite us to walk the last 3 miles with them.
Wow.
And they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars
Wow.
today, and we started it all back then. And this is Essex County Chief Peter Carnes, is in there from Wenham. I don't know whether you remember
Show
him or
where
not.
you are. You're at the end, aren't
I'm
you?
here on the left-hand side, waving. Yep. And we did that for about 9 years.
What months do they go through that?
In September.
I see.
It was in September. It wasn't very hot.
And then this is one of the other things. It's the controversy. This is my article. This is a controversy of gray matter, if you remember that.
Only too well. It's funny, when I turned 65 back then, the town asked me to stay on for 2 more years.
Remember that.
What a contrast from when I first got on, that they wanted me to stay on for 2 more years. And I said I would, and then the unions in the area were tremendously upset by that because they figured that I was going to destroy the retirement system at 65. And as a result, and I don't know for whatever other reasons, the town changed their mind. And because they did, I said, I'm going to go to court for age discrimination. And I did. And Dick Landers, he was my captain at the time, and he was a nice guy.
He is a nice guy.
And
Was a nice guy.
He was a little upset that I was doing that. And I said to Dick, Dick, take the police exam.
This is the other one, the other article.
And I said, and if you pass the exam, if you come in on the top 3, I will leave before the exam expires. The exam is good for 2 years. So I went to court, and I won in Lawrence, and the town appealed it. We went to Boston, and I won again. And then they appealed it nationally, you know, and I couldn't understand why, because they were the ones that asked me to stay. But I was in court, and my problem was that I was running out of time. My 2 years were coming up, and at that time, the state police combined with the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and the retirement age for the state police at that time was age 50. But a lot of these people in the Registry of Motor Vehicles, they were 50 years old, which meant that they had to retire.
Wow.
And they didn't want to do that, and they went to court. And when they went to court, the judge made the decision that the state police do not have to retire at any age as long as they take a physical every year, and that's true today. So there's no doubt, if I didn't make that promise, I could very well be the chief today. But I did. I made the promise, and I left, and Dick Landers became the next.
And then we
chief
have
of
a picture of the 3 chiefs here. That is a lovely picture. And I thank you for sharing that
Dick
with me.
Landers and Stewie Chase and myself, and certainly that was taken before Neil Led is the chief now.
Yes, and he's doing a wonderful job.
And he's doing a good job. I know they're giving him a hard time.
I'm sure they are.
I'm glad to hear that, because they did the same thing to me. That means he's trying to do a good job.
I want to acknowledge that, because any time that there's change for people who don't want change, there's always controversy.
Always
And you can only say that if you don't have controversy, you have a chief that's not worthy of their salt.
Well, you know, you got to have controversy.
Yes.
Yeah. Change is difficult for a lot of people.
It is.
Yeah.
But I like this picture because you all look. You're the oldest, but you wouldn't know that you're the oldest here in this picture, because each one of these chiefs has left their mark for the better for this town.
They have, yeah.
And Landers is an old name in town.
He was an old
wonderful,
townie, yeah.
wonderful person.
See, Stewie wasn't a townie either.
No.
And I was a Tracy Street kid.
This is my favorite picture of all of the whole bunch. This is my favorite picture.
That picture there
is Sean.
Is my grandson Sean. He's 8 years old, and I think I was marching in the parade, the Memorial Day parade. They asked me as a retired chief to march in the parade, and little Sean was with his dad on the side of the road, and when he saw me, he ran over. He ran into my arms, and I picked him up, and his father came over and took this picture. And when you look at it, it's ice cream, hot dogs, candy, and that little boy, and you can see the warmth, the love there. And so this picture is better than any other picture I've ever taken.
It's worth the journey.
Well worth it. That was just a wonderful experience.
It's a wonderful experience, and you've had a wonderful life. You really have.
Well, I guess we have time.
Sure.
When I became the chief in 1979, people wanted to take me out to lunch and all that, and I did that for a very short time, I realized that it wasn't healthy, and I joined the health bar. And I've been going to the health bar 5 days a week since 1979. And I had a health problem 10 years or so ago, and but I overcame that, and I still go to the health bar 5 days a week. I run, lift some light weights, and
You look good.
I'm hanging in there.
You look good.
I'm trying hard.
But, for the young people nowadays, of course, police work is altogether different. They have so many innovative things. What would you recommend to a person that's going to pursue a criminal justice degree? What would you do?
Well, I think today the standards are a little bit higher, that they have to go and pursue a criminal justice degree. The first thing to do is go to college, educate yourself, and then if you want to take some criminal justice courses, do that. And by the time you're through, you'll know whether you want to be a police officer or not. But there was a couple of programs that we didn't discuss, was that I created a youth corps.
Yes.
There was a bunch of kids, at any age, and I used to hold classes for them to come to the police station, and I would lecture to them about what it was to be a police officer. And there was a picture.
It got next
we
to me
had
the
a
shovel.
long picture with a bunch of us.
And
Chris Kearns was one of those pictures. That picture is missing.
It may be.
And we went to a campsite out where there was about 100 students and there was about 30 police officers, and we dressed down like the students and took part of their games. We became a student, and that sort of, the students finally realized that we're human beings.
Well,
and not just police officers.
I think that it's very important.
There was a picture, and you had
There was
that
a picture.
there.
I have it. Here it is. It's picture number 29.
There it is.
It's a picture of, if they can put that on the
that's
format,
Chris,
number 29.
That's Chris Kearns.
Chris Kearns.
Yeah.
He's related to Tom Kearns, who used to be a selectman.
Selectman, that's right.
And
those are the kids, and he was having fun with them, and there was a lot of us there. We did all kinds of crazy things that kids would do. We became kids ourselves, and it was a great program. It really was.
But there's so many things that you did institute. We're talking about that had never been before: accreditation, Project Dare, to be
the Jimmy Fund
the
Run,
Jimmy Fund Run, and all of these things, and did it with dignity. And the townspeople appreciate this. I mean, we do have our share of problems now. A lot of the problems are generated by the malls, really. Yeah.
Well, I guess you can add it up, and they said, I think the town appreciated whatever I did. I don't know if I did that much, but I guess I was appreciated enough so that when I did turn 65, they wanted me to stay on for 2 more years.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's any other chief that's going to ever happen to again, too, but it happened to me. And the town of Danvers was the gateway to life for me. It gave me a whole new life I never expected to have.
And I was thinking to myself that it's how fortunate we were and are to have a person of your caliber.
I was more fortunate. I was more fortunate than anyone else.
And I appreciated you giving me the opportunity to have this interview and to get to know you on a different level. It's just a remarkable journey.
Well, I want to thank you. I had no idea. You came to me out of the blue. I had no idea what you wanted to talk to me about. And now that I sit here and having said what I said, I want to thank you, too, for coming to me and asking me to do this.
I wanted to start this show's format with somebody that I respected and wanted to get to know well, because it was always a thought in my mind, what makes people driven to get the position that they're in or to take that particular type of career. And you've certainly epitomized what I think a police officer should be, starting out with a patrolman and making making chief. It's unbelievable.
You're awfully kind, but thank you very much for saying that.
And thank you very much for making Danvers the town it is.
You're all right.
Thank
You're
you.
a pretty good citizen yourself.